Hey everyone, Scott here to discuss Orphan First Kill, starring Isabel Furman, Julia Stiles, and Rosa Sutherland, directed by William Brent Ball. Now, I didn't go to theaters for this, but I did watch it on Paramount Plus twice. The first time I fell asleep by the, I don't know, 50-minute to maybe an hour, but then I stayed awake for my note taking experience, so that turned out interesting, and then you'll see what I mean by getting this point in. The year is 2007 in Estonia when we see a new psychiatrist named Anna entering the mental hospital in Estonia. For her first day at work, as she stops, as she meets Lena, as she escapes, and Lena, but who am I kidding, is actually known as Esther, returned by Isabel Furman. And this movie isn't fucking fooling me that her name is Lena. I'm going to call her Esther for the rest of the movie, and I'm about 5 minutes into it, as she's was going to stab Anna, but is taken back to her room. And why didn't they make this movie first instead of that bullshit movie that was last time I'll say? Because they explain right off the bat that she's a full-grown woman and is at the age of 31, even though Isabel Furman did look like she was 10 years old, but she was actually 12 when the first one was made, but she's actually 25 years old in real life, as she was 12 when the first film came out. So I can't really make sense of this plot nor series by any means, because it makes no fucking sense. Esther brings a guard in her room and kills him by smashing his head in the wall and steals his key, and through the doors to officially escape, and lets another loony whom we met earlier, I forgot her name honestly, go loony on a guard, as she gives her a pill to chill out. And is any of this working for me? Yes and no, I'll say, because it's a clever way to escape and lets the other patients out and stops the cameras from recording as she escapes. But there's the no part of it is she'll get caught as she did by Anna, but fortunately she says to her boss, "This job isn't for me," which was too convenient. But as she gets home, Esther kills her so nobody can say anything about her escape. And is any of this making sense? Kind of, as this should have been the first movie. Even though it's a prequel, I'm not talking about, I'm talking about the original movie. Esther finds a look alike to match and disguise herself as this kid that was named Esther Albright. And I do wish this was the first movie. Otherwise, it would have been a better movie for that reason alone. In Darien, Connecticut, we meet the kid Esther is disguising as her real mom, her real mom and dad, named Tricia, played by Julia Stiles, and Alan, played by Donald Sutherland's son, Rosif Sutherland. And they have some drama about how Esther went missing, after a sport with the swords I'm not too familiar with except for that James Bond film called Die Another Day. And they got news about finding Esther in Moscow, Russia. And Tricia reunites with Esther and gets on a plane with Tricia and beats herself up for mistaking someone who has passed. So that's what that was all about in the first film? And they arrive and we learn Esther has a brother named Gunnar, who seems like a total asshole to his sister to begin with. And I didn't like this character at all, but I do like Tricia and Alan as a couple better as a couple than last time with Kate and John, as these characters felt more believable than the last film, as Esther gets to their home and listens to old music on a record player, and the cinematography was fine at best. Esther talks with a psychologist named Dr. Seeger with a parrot named Sydney, who knows there's something completely different about Esther, while a little boy watches what she's doing, which is overhearing the conversation between Dr. Seeger and Tricia. And as they leave, a man follows her out of the country and takes pictures of her, which turns out to be the detective that found her, which was random in a satisfying way, I'll say. Next scene, she talks with Gunnar's friends as they ask her to get Gunnar, as she says in Russian, "I'll cut your balls off," and calls him a shit stain. And I get the impression the friends of Gunnar's don't like her either, and they're also a bunch of fucking assholes. And our characters I don't like either, especially when we get to that party scene later on. And Esther learns of a light where she can see invisible prints drawing a picture of Alan, so that explains the last one, in 30 seconds. And like she did with John in the last film, she's obsessed with Alan, while Tricia notices something different with Esther, while a cop enters their home and tells her welcome home, and she moves somewhere where she can overhear them talking and acts rude to the cop. And this movie is an improvement over the first film, sure, because we learn things right out at the beginning, unlike the last film where we learn about it at the end of the movie with a twist that pissed me off even back in theaters in 2009. Esther spots Alan having sex with Tricia, and she rips the red dress she was going to wear at a gala party, while Gunnar watches Esther and puts her straight to her room as friends come by and talk about her behind her back. That's the party scene. As she comes out with him and she tells him to go fuck himself, which was kind of funny in a serves him right kind of way. Alan and Tricia get back home to hear water going on a while. Tricia looks at her Bible, and discovers Esther's plans, which worked a little better than last time, as its pacing is much better than the first film. Esther kills the cop that found Esther to begin with, and Tricia learns Esther is not who she says she is, and asks her questions and learns about the fucked up things Esther is doing at this point, as she shoots the cop dead and asks for help from Esther to keep the death Tricia did at a secret. While Esther is still pretending to be Esther, and Tricia tells Gunnar she's a full grown-ass woman and to live with it while Alan doesn't know a damn thing at this point. When I fell asleep, that's when I ended up falling asleep the first time, as this is another bullshit twist I don't like, but I don't hate it as much as the first film, I'll say. Esther, Tricia, and Alan go to Dr. Seeger and tells the story that I found very hard to believe, and Alan is still the idiot that doesn't know shit about Esther as a full-grown woman, which is too much for me to handle, sure. Gunnar talks shit with Esther and calls her immigrant and acts like she doesn't matter because she's from Russia, which is a terrible thing to say, as I get the impression he's a racist motherfucker. And someone poisons some pill powder on some kind of food as Esther continues to paint with Alan until he gets exhausted, and Tricia comes in and tells Esther Alan is her husband, and she's not into the movie to her, and the movie is fucked up, but I'm having an okay time with it at best. Someone whom I'm guessing is Gunnar off-screen kills the mouse Esther loves so much, and she makes breakfast for everyone, including Tricia's smoothie, as she pretends to love it as she dumps it in the garbage disposal, which is fucked up for damn sure. And I also get the impression at this point she's more comfortable around Alan than around Tricia, which is the same idea as the last film, sure. And Gunnar, as they attack Esther at the train station, and Esther takes off in her car and gets pulled over by a cop while smoking a cigarette, which is a stupid thing to do to begin with, and the acting is mediocre at best. Tricia and Gunnar try to kill Esther, but she runs while Gunnar throws her down the stairs, and she gets up while Tricia gets a call from Alan as he's on the way home, and Esther escapes and hides somewhere while Gunnar finds her, and Esther kills him with a crossbow and stabs his face about 1,000 times, which was hysterical to me. Tricia comes in after Gunnar's death and goes after Esther as she throws her around and choke and bloody each other up to death, and suddenly the house goes on fire as Tricia gets her to her, but Esther jumps out the window and Tricia follows her up the roof as Alan comes home to see the fire, and he reaches them. Tricia falls down to the ground as she's trying to tell him about Esther, and he figures it out, and Esther pushes him off the roof with Tricia as the house burns down Esther dresses herself, grabs her Bible, and walks out, and we end up with Esther going to an adopting agency with Sister Abigail. And the climax was fine, but definitely better than that climax of the first film, for damn sure. Now it's time for the rating. I'll give this movie a 5.2 out of 10. This is sort of an improvement over the first film, as I like a few of these characters better than that first film, and the plot worked better this time than the last time, as it didn't piss me off as much. The cinematography is fine, as it looks good, and the pacing in this is much better than last time. The movie was just okay at best, as I had an okay time with it, as the acting was mediocre at best, and this explains what you should know in the first 10 minutes, and it worked for me better than the way how they explained it at the end of the first film. So I'd like to thank you guys for joining me for this series, and until then, it's time to say goodbye.